I hit the red button. I'm all set. Great. Awesome. Welcome. This is We'll Do It Live, enterprise content staging with Workspaces. I'm Devin Zuchek. I've been a Drupal developer for, I don't know, like 15 years. I really drank the Drupal Kool-Aid. That's all I've been doing for the past 15 years. Currently, I'm a Drupal architect at Purple Innovation. If it sounds familiar, that's the mattress company. So if you want to meet up afterwards and talk Drupal or sleep, I'm good with that. So we're going to talk about the Workspaces module in Drupal 10.3 and beyond, and using it for staging content on not your staging site, on your production site. So I'm going to talk about how awesome Workspaces is, talk through some problems, some solutions. Might be a little basic at first if you've used Workspaces or content moderation or stuff like that, but we'll move on to more advanced techniques. So I'm going to describe a problem that I think is really common with like large content sites and big organizations. So as always, we start with a problem. Client says, I want to see how these new images will look on this batch of like 42 pages. And, all right, maybe it's not 42 pages, but at least with the teams that I support, this happens all the time. We log into the stage site. We say, okay, oh crap, the stage site's out of date. I can't change the image on it. I gotta like reauthor all these pages to get it to show up, or I have to reload production to stage so I can start experimenting with it there. So we copy the production site to the stage site. DevOps fails, GitHub is down, something like that. The database doesn't reload. You got to work through all those issues. Then you realize that your configuration import has failed because the stage site doesn't mesh with your production database for some strange reason. You can't figure it out. I've hosted on Pantheon, Acquia, Kubernetes, whatever. This happens all the time. It's kind of unavoidable. You have to answer all the questions while your stage site is reloading. You probably broke what someone was doing. They were testing something, the stage site went down, someone's page got deleted, someone was demoing something on stage, and now it's reloading, and now it's inaccessible and throwing an error, site's down, the stage acting up. Happens all the time. And another issue that is kind of the root of all these is that people treat the staging site as like a pristine copy of like what's going to go to production, which kind of slows things down and inhibits your development because you can't experiment there because so many people are working on it. So that's really not ideal. So finally, you get the stage site reloaded. You get to make the change. You see, okay, looks great. You see how pretty it looks. You get approval. Production says, okay, we're ready to go to prod. You change it on production. Doesn't look the same because you did something different. You had to do this twice, so you messed up. You put the buttons in the wrong order. You used the wrong image. You adjusted the crop. The crop was incorrect, so you wasted a lot of time. You did it twice, and it didn't work. So that's a big problem. We can't experiment on production. Either you or your site builders are doing things in two places, or more. If you have more sites, that wastes a lot of time. There's no way to make those changes on production and also like kind of preview them and show them to someone else to get approval. And environments are also expensive. Like if you manage it yourself, or if you use another hosting provider, they'll probably charge you for environments, and that takes up a lot of space. That's databases and files and servers and whatever. And it's also your time. You got to wait for production to reload to stage. You interrupt everyone's work to get this done. So problems are solved with enterprise content staging. It's kind of hard to describe, but I've seen a few definitions. I think it could be narrowed down to just creation and governance. And so Drupal right now is really, really good at creation. We all know that. You can do anything you want with Drupal Layout Builder, Drupal CMS, etc. What it's not really good at is governance. So can you look at the site, stage a whole bunch of changes, and then have someone say, yes, this is exactly what we want, and this is exactly how we want it to appear on production when you deploy it. And there's not really a guarantee for that in a stage site and production site configuration. So there's some solutions out there. I'm not ignoring them. There's content moderation. That's been in use for years and years and years. I frequently use that to implement governance for customers like that. But there's limitations. So your new edits, if you have a content moderation site, they go into pending revisions. If you enable workflows, you can enforce the governance, at the same draft to review to approval to published workflow. But right now you can only do that for a single item. You can't publish a group of items. You have to set up moderation on every supported type. So if you're just doing content, that's fine. You set up workflows on that. But let's say you're also working with custom blocks or some other entity type or like a web form, I don't know, something like that. You have to set up that differently because each entity is moderated in a different way. And there's also no site preview. So if you have content moderation and you modify 100 pages, there's no way to send, let's say, somebody that was outside of the Drupal site, hey, check out this version of the site and tell me what you think. Just not possible out of the box, not just with minimal configuration. So enter Workspaces. This module, it was in Drupal, I think, since like 8 or 9, but as of 10.3, it's marked as stable. So the goal of this module is to mimic a completely separate environment. It has the potential to stage the entire site, so we're not just talking content. Menu links, blocks, taxonomy terms, I don't know, anything. Staging anything revisionable, which is basically anything in Drupal. If you use Drupal, nodes are revisionable, menu links are revisionable, custom blocks are revisionable. And so this is just harnessing that power that we already have to stage big batches of changes. And there's no additional configuration to set up. You don't have to set up moderation workflows. You don't have to say which entities are supported and which ones aren't. Workspaces takes care of that here. And then after we're all done that, we just kind of publish when we're ready. So I wanted to talk about like pending and draft revisions first, because it's pretty critical to understand how Workspaces works. If you've done content moderation in Drupal, this is just a refresher. This is having a revision of the page that is not published yet. So you have your current revision. Above it, you have your not current revision. That one's not visible until you actually publish that revision. Content moderation already does this. It allows you to create these workflows so that you can preview a change, but as a logged in user, only for that single page, not to anybody else. So that's fine. But what if you have 100 pages, or 500 pages that you need to stage? It really gets out of hand really quick. So I will do a very, very short demo. Introducing Workspaces, all I did was I installed my brand new Drupal site. I installed Workspaces UI, which is just the separation of the Workspaces and the UI module. It'll enable both. If you're on 10.3, it's just Workspaces. Pretty sure you can figure that out. And then here we are. I've got my brand new site up. This is out of the box. I have not configured anything on this site at all. Only because the Workspaces UI is enabled, now I get this nice little selector up here. This is the Workspaces selector. So we are currently in the live site. This is production. Any change I make here will also be visible in my tab here. And this tab is a container tab, so this tab is logged out. This tab is logged in. So if I go to content, I can add an article. And we can just save that. Okay, so that's visible. That's also visible in our production site as an anonymous user. I'll also create a page, and I haven't configured staging or anything like that. This is just straight out of the box. Like I did an about this page, so I'll just stage an about this page. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, so we see that, but now I want to actually, whoops, let's go add it to the menu. There, now we add a menu link. Okay, great. So here's my article. Here's my About Us page. So now what I'm going to do, I'm still in live. I'm going to switch the workspace to stage. Okay, now we're in the stage workspace. So you can really think about this as just a completely different environment. And you can poke around, make changes, and it's not going to affect live at all. So if we go to this article, we can update this title. And that will have saved this, but we're still in the stage workspace. So I'll switch over to here. Obviously that hasn't updated. It's very similar to content moderation. It's kind of same thing. But what we can also do is we can also go to our About Us page, and I can change this completely. I could just say like current news. Here's item 1. And I can save that, and I can say, okay, it's current news. It's like, oh, that's weird, the menu link. Oh, I forgot to update the menu link. So we'll go into the menu, and we'll just call this, news. That's a good name for that. Okay, so I've made those changes. Let's go manage this workspace. Now I see this has grouped all the changes that I made in the site. I didn't have to set anything up. I didn't have to set up any moderation workflows. I didn't have to specifically say, hey, I want my content to be part of the workspace. This is grouping up every change that you made in Stage and storing it in this workspace. So if we go to our production site, still nothing is visible. Even the menu link hasn't changed yet. It's still there. There's no indication that we're staging any sort of content to the anonymous user. And then really easy, if I go back to Workspaces, there's my live workspace, which is the live site. Here's the Stage workspace. I can hit publish content. It tells me, hey, you've got a menu link. You've got 2 content items that you staged that are ready to be published. And I say, okay, let's publish them. And then if we refresh this page, all our changes have been made. Now I have news. I updated the title. They were all published in a batch. Didn't have to do anything. Didn't have to set up a view to publish all these items out of the box. So that is really awesome. That's a huge step for Drupal, I thought. If the demo fails, these are my slides if the demo just didn't work and I couldn't figure it out. So I just highlighted, hey, these things changed. Look, here's the live site, here's the Stage site. Then you got your nice little publish screen. So how does it work? Okay, so we have our 3 things that we were working on. Revisions, I guess like 7.14 and 3 will say. All Workspace is doing is creating this entity that stores those revisions that you made in that workspace. And so those 3 changes that we made, it just stored them in a workspace association entity so that we know that that's part of that group. Basically like a revision group, essentially. So there was a new hook introduced to Drupal called hook entity preload. There's not going to be much coding in this presentation, just bringing this up, because it allows us to, on request, swap out the content that is actually being displayed to the user. And so with this, we can then say, okay, well, the user's viewing Article 1, but we want them to see revision 3 instead. And so that's what we're doing here. So because of that, Workspaces is safe. So like you saw, because I was in Stage, I made changes. They did not affect production at all. And if you tried to do something, like if you tried to go and like change the site title in the Stage site, it's not on the approved list of forms because it's not something that can be like revised, and so it says, no, you can't change that right now. Like you have to switch to live and do it. So you know that if you give someone access to use the system, as long as they're in Stage, you can promise them, okay, there's nothing you can break. It's going to be contained in this environment, and it's going to be tracked and versioned in that workspace association.
Is that by default? Does look like
this is by default, yeah.
This is like Drupal status.
It's all out of the box. Yeah. There's some other stuff that makes this a little bit nicer than just no, you can't do that. But this is just out of the box Workspaces by default. So there's protection of forms and entities to make sure like you don't save something. Like if you want to edit a user, it'd say like you shouldn't version users. You have to switch back to the live site to edit your users. So that's it. End of presentation. You can all go home. I'm going to talk about going beyond core. So now that we know about Workspaces, there's so many cool things that we can do with contributed modules, some core patches, and then some experiments that are not yet stable yet, but I think are really cool and like really, really promising. So Workspaces Extra, this is a contrib. It's pretty stable. It has some module extensions. It adds some UI features to the workflow, so you can like open and close a workspace. You can completely roll back the changes. So the changes that I published to live in that demo, with this module, I can just go back in and just undo them. And it just reverts the revision to what the revision was at the time. So it's pretty simple. If you have 2 workspaces, it would let you like move or discard changes. And there's just various UI improvements. So if you're starting out with Workspaces, I actually just recommend getting Workspaces Extra and just enabling it. The stuff that comes out of the box with Workspaces Extra isn't very intrusive. so it's not going to like break anything or make something like more difficult. There's a bunch of submodules that it has. I'm going to talk about a couple of them in particular. The scheduler, preview, and config, and there's a couple other contribs that I'll also talk about. So first one, scheduling is great. This is a huge ask for our team because they don't want to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to publish a press release or something like that. So every workspace, if you enable scheduler, you just get a publish on configuration, you plug that in there. It does the same exact thing that I did in the stage site when I clicked publish. Really simple, not that much to say about it, but it's an awesome addition to the core Workspaces functionality. The next thing is really, really awesome that I'm going to dive into a little bit. We can generate a preview link that you can send to someone that doesn't even have a Drupal account, doesn't even have a user account in your site. They can click that link, and when they click that link, they'll see that workspace and not the live one. So this is really cool. I mentioned this because I'm going to build on it a little bit later, but it uses a negotiator to actually like activate that workspace silently for the user. You can also set an expiry, so if you only want that link being active for like a day for security reasons or whatever, you can do that. There's also a nice little redirect URL, so if you want to direct that user to look at a specific page, you send them that link, they'll click the link, and then it just redirects to the page that you want in that workspace. So how does that work? Negotiators. So the request comes into Drupal. It looks at something. Maybe it's like a cookie or query string, or if you're logged in, maybe it's like a certain role or something. And then it just asks, what workspace should I load? And so that cookie, for example, it sees the cookie. It knows that that cookie is associated with the stage workspace, and then it delivers you the stage workspace instead of the live workspace. So that's really cool. It's really flexible. Now we can move into moderation, which is a big one. It's kind of complex, but here we go. So another issue that I see all the time, marketing comes to the authoring team and says, we need to make a dozen changes to our front matter. A lot of pages, a lot of things like that. And they say, oh, we have someone, yeah, they know Drupal, they're totally fine, just give us production access. And you're like, absolutely not, that's never going to happen. But in the before times, you would say like, all right, we'll make the changes on stage first, we'll see how they look, and then we'll replay them all in production, and then we have run into the same issues that we have when I was talking about before, where it's just a pain. You have to do everything twice, you have to QA everything twice, you have to go through the same process on production that you did on stage. It's just a colossal waste of time, and I wish we never had to do it. So how do we solve this? Out of the box, Workspaces also offers this really cool functionality where when we create a workspace, we can just assign a user to that workspace. We can grant them this permission, which is just bypass content entity access and own workspace. And that means that they can only edit content inside of that workspace. And so you're essentially preventing them from making any live changes, and they're kind of locked into this little space where you can then later approve their work. So let them wreak havoc in their own space. Remember what I said before, where workspaces were safe, it's not going to let you edit anything in production. Since they can't switch back to the live space, they have to stay in their own workspace, they're basically locked down into creating content in their own space. And it's that simple. This little demo here, I just wanted to show. So, I'm in the live space, I'm logged in as the vendor. I can't edit it, there's no edit tab on this screen. I switch to the active workspace, I click edit, now I can edit this. And it's only because I've been assigned to this vendor workspace, I can make the change, and it's not going to affect the production site. I switch back to live, my change isn't there, because it's only in the stage site. I can't edit live, I can only edit it in stage. So that's really cool, but we can add even stricter controls. So if you're in a high governance situation, which is what we want Drupal to be a great content creator and also have great governance over the content. So, back to my screen. One second. There we go. So content moderation. Wait, didn't I just say like we're not using content moderation? But we're going to use it. This is really cool. We're going to use it to moderate items that are within the workspace, and so not just not the workspace itself, but the items within the workspace. And so remember when I made all those changes to stage, we can ensure that every change that I made to stage has to go through a moderation workflow before you can actually publish that content to live, which is really good for governance. So if I made these changes and I go to publish the workspace, like I did in the stage site, you're just gonna get a message pop up and it says, sorry, you can't publish it because these 3 items are in unpublished moderation, which means they have not been approved. And so if I was that vendor, I can't publish my own changes, or even the person that granted the vendor access to do that, they might not be able to publish those changes. And so you can enforce this, and this is just out of the box. This is Workspaces plus content moderation. And if you apply that moderation to content entities, then you'll see that content moderation has blocked Workspace from publishing because the items in the workspace are not yet approved. So that is really awesome. You can go even further. There's a contrib called Workspace Approval. So to get even more confusing, you can have content moderation workflows, but applied to the workspace itself. And so in addition to your content items having to go through review, the workspace as a whole also has to go through review and get approvals if you configure it. So you might say, okay, this workspace needs 2 approvals from these 4 people or something like that. You can configure that with Workspace Approval. Really nice addition to workflow. It really gets that governance really tight. And it has, all the buttons that you download from content moderation. It's the same exact thing. It's just moderation and workflows applied to workspaces. So it's just like workflows. They come in. This would be like your review. You would see, okay, like they made these changes. Here's the approvers that you have to get it from, and their status is pending. So they haven't approved this list of content yet, and so they have to wait to get approved before they publish. So the other things we can do, it's not just content. We can do everything. Workspaces also has a submodule. Workspaces Extras also has a submodule called WCE config. Config will let you stage config changes. So we're not talking content, we're talking like config changes. So think something like either views or a block layout configuration, or maybe something like this, for example, is the site name. You can stage. It will just stick that config inside of a table and say this is associated with a workspace, or like an appearance change. So I changed the color from blue to purple. So because I'm in this stage layout, I can see a different version of the theme because it's live. It's using the original version. So you can kind of see. Remember that list we had where we showed, the articles and the pages and the menu links that we had staged. Now there's another entry at the bottom, which is Olivero settings. So it saw that I made a change to the color, and it logged it and said, oh, okay, there's actually a change to the color setting here. And it's going to be part of that batch that we end up publishing. So WC config is kind of experimental, but if you're doing stuff like that where you're making changes to like site configurations and you want to stage it, that might be a solution for you. All right, here we go, ready for brain melt. So there's a restriction in core right now. So a content item can only have a change in one workspace. So that means if you made a change in the stage workspace to page 1, if you try to edit the page workspace in live, it'll say you can't do it. Same thing if you had another environment like stage 2. You can't make a change there if there's a page being edited in a different workspace. So that might be fine for your needs. If it's not, and you need to have kind of like parallel running workspaces, there's a module called Workspaces Parallel, and this is the only module that I've written out of all the modules that I talk about, so this is my contribution to, to Workspaces. It works similar, except now we have 2 workspaces, A and B. We've edited node 1 in both workspace A and workspace B. We've edited a block 2, we've edited a node. Okay, but how does this work? So the latest version of node 1, for example, is above live, that's fine. But the latest version of node B is actually, of workspace B, is actually below the published version, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around. But you just kind of have to exclude all the other ones and think that when you view workspace B, you're only viewing the latest revision in workspace B. When you view the live site, you're only reviewing the latest revision of a page that is not in any other workspace. And so you're just excluding the revisions that don't apply to you, essentially. And so it kind of looks like this on the revisions page. It's kind of tricky. I've been trying to figure out a better UI for this, maybe some sort of branching pattern, just like Git, where it says oh, this was forked from A, and then this was forked from B, and then here's where they lie, and all that stuff. But that's a work in progress, but essentially when you publish Workspace B, for example, it's just going to take the revisions that we made in Workspace B, and it just makes those live. So it copies those to live, and now Workspace B is now the published version of your site. It just copies the revision, makes it live, and then you can continue on. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to make it so confusing? Well, think about something where you have your live site, you schedule something for April Fool's Day, you're following that, you're making little edits, but at the same time, your team's like, oh, we got to start working on the holiday sale like right now for like, Memorial Day or something like that. Even though you're editing this page 1 for April Fool's Day to be funny, you can also be editing that same content in the holiday sale. And so what happens is, you'll publish your April Fool's Day workspace, all your revisions in April Fool's Day will go live, and then later on, the holiday sale team is still working on that stuff. When they publish, then those pages will go live. They'll just overwrite April Fool's Day. Kind of requires a little bit of thought because it's the concept of like the last write wins. So it's not like Git where you're like reintegrating the pages. It's like whatever's in that workspace at the time, that's the one that gets written. So what other things can we do? This kind of gets more complicated. So experience testing. So you're being tested. What else can we do? So we delivered a different version of the site to an anonymous user with like previews, for example. Well, what if we split up our audience and we sent one of them one workspace and one of them was on a live site? So we can effectively actually do an A/B test here. So if you have a tool like Optimizely, Convert, even if you just have like Google Analytics, you can kind of tag your analytics to have the current workspace that you're in, and then you can make decisions based on that. So if you wanted to move a button, edit the block in the testing workspace, and then have that delivered to 50% of your users. See which front page has the least people navigating away. See which workspace has the least clicks on support, meaning that maybe that workspace has better, more targeted information than your live workspace. So one way of doing this, kind of gets a little technical, but we can do this with the data layer. So remember like negotiators? Remember negotiators, we can authorize a request, we set the cookie, it loads a different workspace, all that stuff. We can use that to just add a little page attachment. All we do is check which of the workspaces is active. We get the ID, we kind of stash it in Drupal settings on the data layer. And then with JavaScript, if you have like Google Analytics 4 or whatever, just pick up that item, send it with your traffic, and then in your analytics you can just say split by workspace, and then you can see which page performed better. So that's a really cool way of doing it. And now to get even more complicated, so I work in like retail, kind of. It's, companies do price experimentation all the time. So you send 50% of your traffic to one segment, you send 50% to another. You show one a different price, and you see if that's going to do the same amount of sales as the lower price. And then if you know, oh, the higher price did better, then you just publish that one. You see like, all right, well, how high can we go? And you stop when the higher price starts to lower sales. So this used to be really complicated. I've done this before. There's a lot of moving parts, to send someone a different price and then actually, bill them for that effectively. But if we use Drupal Commerce, it's very possible. And it is actually, I would say, relatively simple. So I have a little video because this was really, really hard to set up. But essentially, I have my two sites here. I set up on the left is the live site. On the right is the test site. So once this plays, you'll see the prices are the same. Both T-shirts are $3.99. We can click through the little items. This is just commerce out of the box with some things I'm going to tell you about. I configured a preview link. I'm going to put them in a different workspace. And now what happens is, the price changed. This is the same page, it's the same product, it's the same variants, but there's different versions of the variants in the workspace. And so I changed the prices of all the variants, and it persists all the way through the cart, because every time commerce is asking for that variant's price, Workspaces is intercepting it and loading a different variant revision with the updated price. And so you could do this for not just pricing, you can do it for anything, any sort of product attribute, any sort of variant attribute. If you wanted to to test how a product appeared or how a variant appeared, do that to your heart's content. So that was kind of tricky to set up. I'm saying this is kind of experimental because we're going beyond like the core workspaces and even core workspaces extra. But I just wanted to talk briefly about how that was actually set up. All right. Yes. And so you can see I was in the live workspace. These are the variations for that T-shirt. They are, prices on the left is live, prices on the right. I'm in a different workspace. It's a different revision. The prices are different. So if I wanted to, I say, oh, okay, well, people are actually willing to pay like $29 for this T-shirt. I just publish that stage workspace, and now people are paying $29 for a T-shirt. So easy way to do variation pricing. And this setup, like this is all in Drupal. You don't need Optimizely. You don't need Convert. You can just look at your sales and see like, oh, are people actually buying this product now that I've raised the price? But if you don't want to, you still have to split the traffic 50-50, but you can do that with JavaScript. You could say, all right, 50% of traffic, I'm going to set this cookie, and for the other, I'm not going to set it. So you can kind of segment it that way without having to get into those expensive tools like Optimizely and Convert, et cetera. So there were a couple things we had to do because commerce product variations are not revisionable, which means they're not supported by Workspaces. But there's a core patch. It does work. It does work. It needs like testing and validation, but it's pretty solid. I would recommend it if you do have to use this because it might save you from having to pay a lot for one of those tools. So that way it's free. So I had to add variations to commerce products and variations. I had to exclude orders and order items in workspaces because I don't want to have like order 41 be in a different workspace than 42 because then when I query for orders, it's only going to show me the orders that people made in the works. I don't want to do that. I want to have all the orders stored in, but I want them to, each order is going to show the specific version of the product that they ordered, which is supported by commerce. So that's not an issue there. I also had to make changes to this option called Workspace Save Forms, and Save Forms just says like, okay, you know that if you make this change, it's going to affect live, right? And this one you can exclude and say like, yeah, it's fine. Like I don't care about this being in the workspace. You can say, okay, I can exclude that. That's pretty much what it does. So what did we learn now? We learned that, okay, when some client comes and asks you, all right, we got to update all these 42 pages. Say no, say do it in live. Here's the workspace. Make your changes. You can send a preview link to whoever has to approve it. Set up your approvals if necessary for content governance. Publish it, and that's it. Like you only did things once. You didn't have to do things twice. You didn't have to run an export import job. You didn't have to reload stage. All those problems is gone. Really, really awesome with Workspace. I got feedback from my team before I did this presentation. I wanted to really know what they thought about it. We were using like a content moderation workflow mixed with some custom work to give a preview. So I just wanted to focus on a couple issues. So this is unbiased. I asked them for unbiased. So they said like they're not doing merge downs to stage a lot. The only reason that like we do that is for really experimenting with new functionality. So if there's a brand new thing that they want to see, yeah, we'll merge down the stage and we'll do stuff there. But for stuff that can't be done on production, they just go ahead and do it. They like the ability of having to view a full set of changes. They've done this to communicate to stakeholders that like, okay, here's how the site looks. And they don't have to log in, because that was an issue before. We'd have to do like screenshots or screen shares or stuff like that. No more of that. We say, here's the link, check it out, let me know if it's good, and we approve it. Huge reduction in UAT because they can just make the change on production and someone else is reviewing it and say, okay, go ahead. Workspace Revert has saved times. Like if you work in retail, you might have flash sales, and so they publish a flash sale, and then they just click roll back, and the site goes back to where it was before. And A/B testing has been reduced. We have less dependency on using JavaScript to like change page components. So if you're like moving things around, that was really consuming. There are improvements that we can make. If you're managing 10 or like more workspaces, it does get kind of tricky, and so that's one thing we can improve on. Navigation staging is still kind of tricky because of the hierarchy. Parallel workspaces, it gets really complicated. Like if you have something open in 2 tabs, it kind of gets out of hand. There just needs to be more confirmations, dynamic stuff. Like, are you sure like you want to save to this workspace? And publishing is slow when you have like 500 or more pages that are being staged. So that's something that needs to be improved upon. So I have some resources, all the patches that I used. Some things don't yet support workspaces out of the box, so if you have nested paragraphs, I recommend checking out those issues if you have crops, stuff like that. But there's all the modules that were used in this demo. I'll publish the slides, so if you want to just click the link, that'll be fine. And that is it for me. If there's any questions, I know there was a lot to take in. Yeah, sure.
I have two questions.
Yes.
Maybe the first one relates to the core restriction, but let's say
yes.
I've got a bunch of content editors. One of them wants to create a workspace and change an article in the workspace. Are other editors then locked out from editing that same node, or can they both edit at the same time with a big crash and everybody's upset?
So the question was, can authors edit the same page within a workspace or in two workspaces?
Two separate workspaces.
In two separate workspaces, you need the workspace parallel functionality. Yeah, because if someone's editing the page in workspace 1, and someone goes to edit that page in workspace 2, the core restriction will say no.
That'll kill
Yeah.
it. Do they get a message?
Yeah, they do. It says, like, you can't edit this because it's being edited in workspace 1.
Okay. And the other question I have is, let's say someone's changing it in a staging workspace. They're changing an image, and that image then appears somewhere else on the site,
Yes.
say in a view.
Yep.
Within their workspace environment, can they see the changed image on that page that has the view that uses that image they changed?
The question was if they edit an image in that workspace and they go to a view, and that view is doing something like loading the image or something?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that definitely works.
Okay.
Yeah, because that view is probably either loading the entity and then rendering the entity and then showing the image, or it's doing some sort of query to get it. Workspaces does like intercept queries, and so like if you say like load node 1, then Workspaces interferes and says like node 1 revision 7. And so if you have a view that's set up to like, let's say like display a list of whatever, then it will show that image change that they made.
That's
Yep.
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So with two questions. Without the workspace parallel, are we essentially saying that there is a content freeze on live?
Yeah.
On the entire line?
Yeah, so if you edit page 1, yeah, there's a freeze on page 1 of line.
Okay, just on page 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second one is, how do you handle hard-coded links?
How do you handle hard-coded links? I'm not sure what you mean by that specifically.
So like this happens a lot with our site content editors.
Oh.
So they're not all that familiar with relative links, so when they edit over the years, they'll put a hard-coded link. We'll give them a staging link, and then they're like, I don't know how, I ended up on the live site, and I dig through, and it's like, oh, you hard-coded a live link here. That's how you accidentally ended up live. There's no flags on our staging site, so you didn't really check the URL. So that's like a common issue with working with staging live. You sometimes accidentally end up there.
I don't know if this is the answer to the question, but I kind of think like if you started doing everything on production, then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
So
does that make sense?
To clean up the relative links before they even get started.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or I mean, on production, like you could use absolute links because the URL's not going to change because they're on production.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? I have.
I have a question.
Yeah, we have time. Yeah.
We have your line items, that on an order.
Uh-huh.
You have some way of noting whether you had this on a flash sale, or how do you end up indicating whether or not that was option like A or B in terms of your.
Sure. The question was how to indicate that the revision that they purchased was like within a workspace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see if I can do something here. I should be able to show something. Let's see. Yeah. So like even after you like publish a workspace, it does actually keep a revision log. Oh, hang on. See, I turned that off. Let me see stage revision. So you'll still be able to see like I don't think it's built into like the variations like listing, but like internally, Workspaces is still retaining, hey, revision 7 was associated with this workspace.
Okay.
And so theoretically, like you should be able to build something that says, okay, when they purchased this, it was part of this testing workspace.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it does retain that. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to show, but I know like when you make a revision, it'll show you like, all right, this was in stage. Yeah.
Because I guess you probably get people who are like, the folks who are managing your store or whatever are looking at that and say, hey, well, how did this,
Yeah.
how do you reconcile the pricing? Maybe that's a different question for a whole other topic. But
Exactly, yeah. What you could also do is like maybe some custom functionality to like embed the workspace ID like into the order. say like, they were used here, but there's a bunch of stuff there. And we're like Workspaces extra because of the rollback functionality. That's the functionality that actually is like archiving historically where it came from.
So you will want to know what revision it came from.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, so there's some ways to do that. Yeah. Again, the common stuff is very experimental, but it'll get better. Right.
So you talked about how you can do configuration changes within any kind of tracks. How does that play with Git and like, so you have the configuration in Git
Yeah.
and like kind of stabilize. If someone changes those, how does that interact?
Workspaces config is actually just doing an intercept. And so before it actually loads it, well, when you import configuration, Drupal imports it into the database. And then Workspace essentially just intercepts that if you're in that workspace and loads a different config. Yeah, so there's limitations, like you can't put like a field storage into configuration because that actually has to exist because like it has to create database tables and stuff like that. So there are limitations and things like that. But if your configuration is just again like changing the site title or like changing an API key or some sort of configuration that is like only cosmetic, like then it works. Because all it's doing is just intercepting the config load from Drupal.
So then there could be a thing where like, so then what if we have something where somebody makes a change to like, so it's something you have in configuration that's controlled in Git, and then every time you deploy it uses that thing. If someone changes it in a workspace and that gets published, but then you go back and change it in your code,
Yeah.
and now it's changed in Git, does it just always use that workspace one?
Correct, yeah. And I wanted to say the question was like, how does config work? And essentially, exactly, like instead of loading from the root, the database, it just picks the one that like workspace, I think it stashes it away in the table somewhere, and it loads that one instead. Yeah. Yes?
How do you handle content freezes on live when you're changing configurations?
How do you handle content changes on live when how do you handle content freezes on live when you're changing configuration?
Yeah, should we just say the whole site, don't touch it for like 2 days?
I guess like specifically which configurations are we talking
See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Views can be a couple pages and then some are site-wide.
It's kind of hard to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, configuration is like still
That's a management issue.
yeah, but it's also like config is like still very experimental, so it's hard to give an answer to that right now. Yeah. Yes.
Some simple questions. Is there a limit to what is advisable for how many different workspaces you can have?
Ask my team. I don't know. They'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
I would say there's no like real limit. Like I can tell you like sometimes there are like 20 to 25 workspaces active and they're all being worked on at the same time. There isn't a huge performance hit. It's just and it's not even like creating like different pages. It's just different revisions of the same page. So it's just doing what Drupal like already does. It's just intercepting whenever you load something. It checks to see like, oh, is this in a workspace? Get the correct revision ID, which is pretty cheap. So I would say unless you're talking like thousands, it's not going to make any sort of a difference. Yeah.
And then within a workspace, I'm just trying to work through, if you have a number of, let's just say you just have 2 workspaces and many different people using it, and so when you hit publish for that workspace, it will publish whatever has been selected or approved by that node or entity being set to publish. Is that kind of how you could pick and choose what gets pushed live within a workspace? Is there
Oh, yeah. The question was, can you pick and choose what's
yeah.
being deployed in a workspace? So I didn't have a screen for it, but in that page where it listed like, hey, this page has changed, this page has changed, you have an option to just discard the change. So does that make sense?
Well, in sort of my company's space, like people will make something and they're waiting for compliance approval, and somebody else will make something and they're waiting for compliance approval. So if one is accepted and it needs to go out, but they're in the same workspace.
Oh, okay. So let's say you had Yeah, so the question was you have split moderation and workspace. So your workspace might contain 4 pages. 2 of them are good to go. 2 of them are held back.
Right.
So what do you do?
Yeah, like just trying to.
Yep, this comes up all the time. The Workspaces extra module, we've done this. I've done this before. You can take a page and you can move it to a different workspace.
Okay.
So you can take all the ones that are not moderated. You can move that revision to a different workspace and then publish the one that you got approved.
Okay.
So that would actually work because then you have the 2 approved pieces of content in that workspace, You publish that, that goes live. Those others go into a different workspace, and then you just start the moderation process again.
Yeah, we don't actually have moderation. It's like people make content, they get it approved, and
Yeah.
they have to go back and publish it themselves.
There's,
So,
yeah, there's ways to do
they
it.
get
Yeah.
their own workspace, I'm trying to figure out how
Yeah.
to sell
If
it.
you want to talk offline, I can talk about all that stuff. Drupal, sleeping, purple mattresses, I'll talk about all that.
Is there any way to like integrate this with like a get flow or a Pantheon where you would want to push updates just to one workplace?
Probably.
Yeah,
Question
I
was,
think
can,
so.
the question was, can you integrate with Pantheon or something where you want to like push updates one workspace? So I can think of like a kind of weird situation. So like we have some like integrations in our site where it goes to a remote API and it pulls something and then it updates a page. And what we've done actually is when it does that, before it updates the page, it switches to a workspace. And so even on the back end, if you switch to a different workspace and you have some programmatic thing that's updating pages, then those get logged in the workspace. They don't actually go to production. And so that could be possible if you did that, yeah. Maybe. And I'm here all day, so if you have other questions, happy to talk. Thank you for coming, really appreciate it.